The steam from the industrial dishwasher hit Vincent's face like it did every night around 11. His hands moved on autopilot, scraping dried sauce off expensive plates that cost more than his weekly rent. 3 years? That's how long he'd been doing this exact same routine at the Grand Belmont Hotel. Most people didn't even notice him. He was just part of the kitchen machinery, like the ovens or the walk-in freezer. The wealthy guests upstairs in the fancy dining room never looked twice at the people who made their evenings possible. Vincent had gotten used to being invisible. Sometimes it was easier that way, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the ache in his lower back that seemed worse than usual. Or maybe it was because tomorrow marked exactly 10 years since the accident that changed everything. 10 years since he'd stopped being a pianist and became just another guy trying to make rent. Vincent was 42 now, though some days he felt much older. His reflection in the steel countertop showed a tired man with graying temples and permanent dark circles under his eyes. His hands, once his greatest pride, were constantly red and wrinkled from the hot water. But it was his right hand that told the real story. If you looked closely, you could see how the fingers didn't quite bend the same way anymore, how the pinky and ring finger sat at a slightly odd angle. He'd been 25 when it happened. Back then, he was studying at the conservatory, on track to become a concert pianist. His teachers said he had something special, not just technical skill, but real feeling in his playing, the kind that made people stop whatever they were doing and just listen. Then his father died suddenly, heart attack at 53. Vincent had flown back home for the funeral, his mind foggy with grief. On the drive back from the cemetery, a truck ran a red light. The crash wasn't even that bad, really. Everyone walked away. Everyone except Vincent's dreams. His right hand had been crushed against the dashboard. 3 surgeries later, the doctors said he was lucky to have full use of it at all. Lucky. Vincent remembered laughing bitterly at that word. Sure, he could hold a fork, write his name, button his shirt. But playing piano the way he used to? That was gone. The insurance money ran out fast. Medical bills piled up. His mother back in the Philippines needed help too. And now she'd lost her husband and couldn't work the same hours at the market. Vincent did what he had to do. He dropped out of school, took the first job he could find, and started sending money home every month. That was 17 years ago. 17 years of washing dishes, mopping floors, and pretending that the music inside him had died along with his career. But it hadn't died. That was the problem. Sometimes during his afternoon break before the dinner rush, Vincent would sneak into the hotel's grand ballroom. It was empty most days, just sitting there waiting for weddings and corporate events. And in the center of that massive room, catching the light from the crystal chandeliers, was the most beautiful piano Vincent had ever seen. A Steinway Model D, 9 feet of polished ebony perfection. The kind of instrument that cost more than he'd make in 5 years. The first time he'd seen it, something in his chest had physically hurt. He'd tried to stay away. He really had. But the pull was too strong. One day he'd simply walked over and lifted the lid. His fingers had touched the keys, and it felt like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. Now he played whenever he could steal 15 or 20 minutes. He'd taught himself to compensate for his injured hand. His left hand became stronger, carrying melodies that normally belonged to the right. He'd developed his own technique, his own style. It wasn't traditional, and it wouldn't impress any conservatory judges, but it was his. Nobody knew about these secret sessions. The hotel manager would probably fire him if she found out the dishwasher was touching the expensive piano. But Vincent couldn't stop. Those stolen moments were the only time he felt like himself anymore. Tonight, as he scrubbed another pile of pots, he could hear music floating down from upstairs. Some kind of fancy event was happening. Through the kitchen service elevator, he caught glimpses of people in evening gowns and tuxedos. Their laughter echoed down the hallways, mixing with the clatter of dishes and the head chef barking orders. 2 worlds, separated by a service door and about $1 million in net worth. Vincent's co-worker, Danny, nudged him with an elbow. Big charity thing tonight. All the rich folks are here. Heard they're raising money for some arts program. That's nice, Vincent said, not really listening. Yeah, they got some famous pianist coming. Supposed to be a big deal. Played at Carnegie Hall or something. Vincent felt that familiar twist in his stomach. Once upon a time, he dreamed of playing at Carnegie Hall. Now he couldn't even play at the local community center without his hand cramping up after 30 minutes. Good for them, he muttered, scrubbing harder at a burnt pan. Danny shrugged and went back to his own station. He was a good kid, 23 and saving money for college. He had dreams too. Vincent hoped he'd make it further than the kitchen. The night wore on. More dishes came down. More food went up. The elevator doors kept opening and closing, bringing smells of expensive perfume and the sound of clinking champagne glasses. Vincent's feet hurt. His back hurt. His hands hurt, especially the right one. It always hurt more when he was tired. Around 9:30, he took his trash out to the dumpster in the back alley. The night air was cool, a relief after the heat of the kitchen. He could hear the muffled sound of applause from the ballroom above. The event was in full swing. Vincent leaned against the brick wall and closed his eyes for just a moment. He let himself imagine, just for a second, what it would be like to be up there instead of down here, to be the one making people applaud instead of the one scraping their leftovers into the trash. But that wasn't his life. This was his life, and tomorrow he'd be back here doing the exact same thing. And the day after that, and the day after that, he pushed off the wall and headed back inside. The dishes weren't going to wash themselves. If someone had told Vincent that in less than 2 hours everything would change, he would have laughed. Life didn't work that way for people like him. Miracles happened to other people, to the ones upstairs in their fancy clothes. But sometimes, just sometimes, the universe has other plans, and tonight, fate was about to deal Vincent a hand he never saw coming. Vincent had just finished loading another rack of wine glasses when he heard the commotion upstairs. It started as raised voices, then turned into what sounded like full-blown panic. The kitchen manager's radio crackled to life, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. "What's going on?" Danny asked, looking up from the prep station. The kitchen manager pressed her finger to her earpiece, listening intently. Her face went pale. "The pianist is sick. Food poisoning or something. He can't perform." Vincent's hand stilled in the soapy water. "What do you mean he can't perform?" the head chef demanded. "The program starts in 40 minutes. I mean, he's in the bathroom throwing up. The event coordinator is losing her mind up there. 200 guests and no music." The kitchen erupted in worried chatter. Everyone knew how important tonight was. The hotel's reputation was on the line. Rich people didn't forgive these kinds of mistakes, and when rich people got angry, it was always the workers who paid the price. Vincent pulled his hands out of the water and dried them slowly on his apron. His heart was doing something strange in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. It was almost like hope, and it terrified him. "Maybe they can play recordings," someone suggested. "At a charity gala for live music education?" "They'd look like idiots," the manager shot back. Vincent opened his mouth, then closed it. This was insane. He was a dishwasher. They'd laugh at him. Worse, they'd fire him for having the audacity to even suggest it. He had bills to pay. His mother depended on him. He couldn't risk this job over some crazy fantasy, but his feet were already moving toward the service elevator. "Where are you going?" Danny called after him. Vincent didn't answer. He wasn't even sure himself. His body seemed to be operating on its own, like it had been waiting 17 years for this exact moment and wasn't about to let fear stop it now. The service elevator took forever. Vincent's reflection stared back at him from the polished metal doors. He looked ridiculous. His shirt was stained with dishwater and food. His hair was a mess. He smelled like the kitchen, a mix of grease and industrial soap. What was he doing? The doors opened on the main floor, and the difference was immediate. Thick carpets, crystal chandeliers. The air smelled like expensive perfume and fresh flowers. Vincent felt like an alien who just landed on another planet. He could hear voices coming from the ballroom, angry, stressed voices. He followed the sound, his worn work shoes silent on the plush carpet. The ballroom doors were open, and inside was controlled chaos. The event coordinator, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s named Patricia, was on her phone, her free hand gesturing wildly. Several staff members hovered nearby, all looking helpless. "I don't care if he's the third alternate, get him here now," Patricia was saying into the phone. She paused, listening. 2 hours? The event starts in 35 minutes. She hung up and looked like she might throw the phone across the room. Vincent cleared his throat. Patricia spun around, taking in his dishwashing uniform with barely concealed irritation. "Kitchen deliveries go through the service entrance. I don't have a delivery." Vincent's voice came out rougher than he intended. "I heard about the pianist, and?" Patricia's tone made it clear she had no time for whatever he was about to say. This was it, the moment where he either spoke up or spent the rest of his life wondering what if. Vincent took a breath. "I can play." The silence that followed was brutal. Patricia stared at him like he'd just suggested flying to the moon. One of the other staff members actually laughed before catching herself. "You're joking," Patricia said flatly. "No, ma'am. I trained at the conservatory. I know the standard repertoire. I can do this." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You're the dishwasher. Vincent, right? From the kitchen?" "Yes, ma'am." She looked him up and down again, and Vincent could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was desperate, but not desperate enough to risk humiliation. "When did you train?" "Started when I was 6. Studied seriously from age 15 to 25. "And why exactly are you washing dishes instead of playing piano?" Vincent held up his right hand. Even from a distance, you could see it wasn't quite normal. "Car accident. I had to stop performing." Patricia walked closer, examining his hand with a clinical eye. "Can you play or not?" "I can play, just differently than I used to. I've adapted." She checked her watch. 32 minutes until guests started arriving. Behind her, through the ballroom's massive windows, Vincent could see cars already pulling up to the entrance. The early arrivals. Patricia closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, Vincent saw something there. Not hope exactly, more like the look of someone about to jump off a cliff because the building behind them was on fire. "Show me," she said. Vincent walked to the Steinway, his piano, the one he'd been sneaking moments with for 3 years. But this was different. Now people were watching. Now it mattered. His hands were shaking as he sat down on the bench. He could feel Patricia's stare boring into his back. This was a terrible idea. He should have kept his mouth shut. He should have stayed in the kitchen where he belonged, but then his fingers touched the keys and everything else fell away. He started with something simple. Just a Bach prelude, nothing fancy, but within the first few measures something shifted in the room. The quality of silence changed. Patricia took a step closer. Vincent's left hand carried the melody with a strength and clarity that shouldn't have been possible. His right hand, despite its limitations, added harmonies that were somehow more beautiful for their imperfection. He'd learned to pour everything he couldn't do with technique into emotion instead. He played for maybe 2 minutes before Patricia held up her hand. "Stop." Vincent's hands froze over the keys. Here it comes, he thought. The rejection. The humiliation. Maybe even the firing. Patricia walked around to face him. Her expression was unreadable. "You've been playing our piano?" Vincent swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. During my breaks. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have." "How long?" 3 years. She shook her head slowly, and Vincent couldn't tell if she was angry or amazed or both. 3 years. All this time we had a pianist in our kitchen. "I can do this," Vincent said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "I know I don't look the part, but I can play for your event. I won't embarrass you." Patricia glanced at her watch again. 28 minutes. Then she looked back at Vincent. Really looked at him. Maybe for the first time since he'd started working there 3 years ago. "You better hope you're right," she said. "Because if you're not, we're both getting fired tonight." Then she turned to one of the staff members.
"Get him to the staff lounge."
"Find him something to wear. Clean shirt at minimum. Move." Vincent stood up from the piano bench, his legs feeling strangely weak. This was really happening. In less than half an hour, he was going to walk out in front of 200 of the city's wealthiest people and play piano. See? Same people who'd never once noticed him carrying their dirty dishes. He followed. The staff member out of the ballroom, his mind spinning. Somewhere in the back of his thoughts, a small voice was screaming that this was going to be a disaster. But another voice, one that had been quiet for 17 years, was singing. The staff lounge had never felt so small. Vincent stood there while 2 hotel employees rushed around him like he was a mannequin. They were trying to dress before a store opening. They'd found a white dress shirt that was almost his size and a black jacket that definitely wasn't. "The sleeves are too short," one of them muttered. "It'll have to work." "We don't have time." Vincent caught his reflection in the mirror. The jacket made him look like a kid who'd borrowed his older brother's clothes. His work pants were still on, slightly damp from dishwater. At least they were black. Maybe in the dim lighting nobody would notice they were polyester instead of wool. "Your hair," the other employee said. producing a comb from somewhere. She tried to tame it into something presentable, but Vincent's hair had other ideas. Years of kitchen steam had given it a permanent wave that no comb could fix. Good enough, she declared, though her tone suggested it really wasn't. Patricia appeared in the doorway. Guests are arriving. You're on in 10 minutes. She looked at Vincent's outfit and sighed. Well, we tried. What should I play? Vincent asked. His mouth had gone completely dry. The program said Chopin, Debussy, and some Gershwin.
Can you do that?
Vincent nodded. He'd played all of those composers 1,000 times, back when his hands worked properly. Then just do what you did before. Play well and maybe we'll survive this. Patricia started to leave, then turned back. Vincent? Thank you for stepping up. Not many people would. Then she was gone. And Vincent was left standing in the staff lounge wearing clothes that didn't fit, about to do something completely insane. Danny burst through the door, slightly out of breath. Dude, is it true? You're really doing this? Looks like it, and that's crazy. That's like movie crazy. Danny grinned. You're gonna kill it, man. I know you will. Vincent wished he had that confidence. His right hand was already starting to ache the way it always did when he was nervous. He flexed his fingers, trying to keep them loose. Come on, Danny said. I'll walk you there. Moral support. They made their way through the service corridors to the ballroom. Vincent could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might crack a rib. At the entrance to the ballroom, Danny squeezed his shoulder. Go show them what you got. Vincent took a breath and walked through the door. The ballroom was transformed. Every table was full, decorated with elaborate flower arrangements and flickering candles. Men in tuxedos and women in evening gowns filled the space with the kind of easy elegance that came from money and privilege. Waiters glided between tables carrying champagne, and in the center of it all under a spotlight sat the Steinway. Vincent's legs felt like they might give out. This was different from playing alone. This was different from playing for Patricia. These were 200 people who'd paid serious money to be here, expecting world-class entertainment. Patricia was at the microphone doing announcements. Vincent waited at the side of the room, trying to be invisible one more time. Old habits. Then he heard his cue. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a slight change of plans this evening. Our scheduled performer took ill, but we're fortunate to have found a replacement. Please welcome Vincent Chen. The applause was polite but scattered, confused. Vincent started walking toward the piano, and that's when he heard it. The whispers. Is that the dishwasher? He works in the kitchen. This is ridiculous. I paid $500 a plate. What is Patricia thinking? Someone actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that cut through the ambient noise like a knife. Other people joined in, a ripple of amusement spreading through the crowd. Vincent's face burned. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to run back to the kitchen where he belonged. His injured hand throbbed. He could feel 200 pairs of eyes on his ill-fitting jacket, his polyester pants, his dishwasher hands, but somehow his feet kept moving. One step, then another, all the way to the piano bench. He sat down and the laughter got a bit louder. Not mean exactly. More like people who thought they were witnessing an elaborate joke they didn't quite understand yet. Vincent's hands hovered over the keys. They were trembling. Through the spotlight's glare, he could see faces at the nearest tables. A woman in diamonds leaning to whisper to her companion. A man checking his phone, already bored. A younger couple exchanging amused glances. These people weren't here to listen to him. They were here to watch him fail. Vincent closed his eyes. He thought about his father, who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for piano lessons. About his mother, who still believed her son was destined for great things even though he sent her money orders from a dishwasher's salary. About every morning he'd woken up in pain. Every night he'd fallen asleep exhausted. Every moment he'd kept playing in secret because the music was the only thing that made him feel alive. He opened his eyes and began to play. He'd chosen Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, not the flashiest piece, but one that had always spoken to him. His left hand found the opening notes, and they rang out clear and pure in the massive room. The laughter didn't stop immediately. It took a few measures, but gradually the sound changed. The whispers faded. The clinking of glasses quieted. Vincent poured everything into the music. All the longing, all the loss, all the years of being invisible. His left hand carried melodies that shouldn't have been possible with one hand alone. His right hand, limited as it was, added touches of harmony that made the piece sound both familiar and completely new. He wasn't playing like a conservatory student anymore. He was playing like someone who'd had his dreams ripped away and had to rebuild them from scratch. Every note carried weight. Every phrase told a story. The piece built to its emotional peak, and Vincent felt tears pressing at the corners of his eyes. But he didn't let them fall. He just played, letting the piano say everything he'd never been able to put into words. When he finished, there was silence. Complete, total silence. Vincent's hands lifted from the keys. Had he messed up? Had his injury made him hit wrong notes he hadn't noticed? His heart sank. He'd failed. Of course he had. What had he been thinking? Then someone started clapping. It was a single person at first, somewhere in the back. Then another joined in. Then another. The sound built like a wave, growing louder and stronger until the entire room was applauding. Vincent stood up from the bench, blinking in the spotlight. People were on their feet now. The woman in diamonds who'd been whispering before had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wet. The man who'd been checking his phone was standing and clapping hard enough to hurt his palms. The young couple were both standing, looking at Vincent like they'd just witnessed something they couldn't quite explain. The applause went on and on. Some people were whistling. Others were calling out. Vincent just stood there overwhelmed, not quite believing this was real. Patricia was crying. He could see her at the side of the room, tears streaming down her face, clapping until her hands must have hurt. But Vincent's eyes found someone else in the crowd. A man in his 60s sitting at one of the front tables. He wasn't just applauding. He was staring at Vincent with an intensity that made everything else fade into the background. Vincent didn't know it yet, but that man was about to change his life. All he knew in that moment was that for the first time in 17 years, he wasn't invisible anymore, and it felt like waking up from a very long dream. The applause was still ringing in Vincent's ears when the man from the front table approached him. Up close, he was distinguished looking, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that came from decades of success. His suit probably cost more than Vincent made in 6 months. That was extraordinary, the man said, extending his hand. I'm Robert Chen. No relation, I assume. Vincent shook his hand, still feeling like he was in some kind of dream. No, sir. Just a coincidence, and I'm a music producer. Been in this business for 30 years, and I've heard a lot of pianists. But what you just did up there? Robert shook his head slowly. That was something different. Something real. Vincent didn't know what to say. People were still coming up to him, shaking his hand, telling him how moved they were. The woman in diamonds hugged him, tears still on her cheeks. A businessman pressed his card into Vincent's palm, saying something about wanting to sponsor his next performance. His next performance. Like there was going to be a next one. Patricia fought her way through the small crowd. Her makeup was smudged from crying, but she was smiling wider than Vincent had ever seen. You saved us. You absolute legend, you saved the whole night. I just played, Vincent said, still not quite processing what had happened. You did a lot more than that. She looked around at the crowd, then back at Vincent. Take tomorrow off, paid, you've earned it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Vincent played 3 more pieces, and each time the response was the same. Standing ovations, people wiping their eyes. The feeling that something magical was happening in that room. When it was finally over, Vincent changed back into his regular clothes in the staff lounge. The borrowed jacket and shirt hung on the door, and for a moment he just stared at them. A few hours ago he'd been scrubbing pots. Now he'd played for the city's elite, and they'd actually listened. His phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from his mother. She always called around this time, when it was morning in Manila. Vincent hit the callback button. Anak, I was worried. You never miss my calls. Sorry, Mama, I was working. Always working. You work too hard. Her voice was warm and worried the way only mothers could be. How are you? Are you eating enough? Vincent looked at himself in the mirror. His eyes were bright in a way they hadn't been in years. Mama, something happened tonight. Something crazy. He told her the whole story. About the sick pianist, about stepping forward, about playing for all those people. His mother was silent on the other end, and for a moment Vincent worried the connection had dropped. Mama, you still there? I'm here. Her voice was thick with emotion. Your father would be so proud. So very proud. Vincent's throat tightened. I wish he could have seen it. He did see it, a knock. I know he did. They talked for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. Vincent sat in the empty lounge for a while after, just breathing, trying to make sense of the night. His phone buzzed again. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Robert Chen from Tonight. Would you be available to meet tomorrow afternoon? I have a proposition for you." Vincent stared at the message. A proposition? From a music producer? This couldn't be real. He texted back a simple yes, and Robert responded with an address and a time. 2 o'clock at a cafe downtown. Vincent barely slept that night. He kept replaying the evening in his mind, convinced that when he woke up it would all turn out to be some elaborate dream. But when morning came, the text message was still on his phone, and his borrowed dress shirt still hung in his closet, smelling faintly of the ballroom's expensive air freshener. The cafe was one of those trendy places with exposed brick and overpriced coffee. Vincent felt out of place the moment he walked in, but Robert was already there, waving him over to a corner table. "Thanks for coming," Robert said as Vincent sat down. "Coffee? It's on me." "Just water is fine." Robert ordered for both of them, then leaned back in his chair, studying Vincent with sharp eyes. "I'm going to be direct with you. Last night I recorded your performance on my phone. Terrible quality, but good enough. I posted it on social media this morning." Vincent's stomach dropped. "You posted it? Without asking? Hear me out. That video has been viewed 50,000 times in the last 12 hours. People are sharing it everywhere. They're calling you the dishwasher pianist. The comments are incredible. Everyone wants to know who you are, where you've been, why they've never heard of you before." Vincent's head was spinning. 50,000 people had watched him play? "Here's what I'm thinking," Robert continued. "This story, your story, it's powerful. Trained pianist, terrible accident, years of struggle, triumphant return. People love that. They want to root for you." "I'm not looking for charity," Vincent said quietly. "This isn't charity. This is opportunity. You have real talent, Vincent. What you've done with your injury, the way you've adapted, it's remarkable. And your playing has something most technically perfect pianists never achieve. It has soul." The waiter brought their drinks. Vincent took a sip of water, his mind racing. "I want to help you record an album," Robert said. "Nothing fancy at first. Just you and a piano. The pieces you played last night plus a few others. We'll release it digitally. See how it does. Based on the response to that video, I think it could do very well." "I work full-time," Vincent said. "I can't just quit my job." "I'm not asking you to." "Not yet. We can record on your days off. Most studio sessions are evenings and weekends anyway." Robert pulled out a folder from his bag. "I had my lawyer draw up a basic contract. Take it home, read it, think about it." "But Vincent, don't think too long. The internet moves fast. Right now, people care about your story. In a month, they'll have moved on to something else." Vincent took the folder with shaking hands. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't even know me," Robert smiled. "I've been in this business a long time. I've made a lot of money helping talented people become famous. But last night, when I heard you play, it reminded me why I got into music in the first place. It wasn't about the money. It was about that feeling when you hear something that makes your heart stop." He stood up, leaving cash on the table for the coffee. "Read the contract. Call me tomorrow." "But Vincent, say yes. You've spent 17 years being invisible. It's time to be seen." After Robert left, Vincent sat in the cafe for a long time, the folder unopened on the table in front of him. Through the window, he could see people walking by. Regular people living regular lives. A week ago, he was one of them. A dishwasher going to work, coming home, sending money to his mother, surviving. Now someone was offering him a chance to do more than survive. Vincent opened the folder and started reading. The contract was full of legal language he didn't fully understand, but the basic terms were clear. Robert's company would pay for recording costs. They'd handle distribution and promotion. Vincent would get a percentage of any sales. His phone buzzed. It was Danny. "Dude, you're viral. There's like 100 videos of you on TikTok. People are going crazy." Vincent pulled up social media. Danny wasn't exaggerating. The video of his performance had been shared, reposted, and remixed. People had added subtitles telling his story. Musicians were reacting to his playing style. Comments poured in from around the world. "This guy made me cry. That's what music is supposed to sound. Like, give this man a record deal immediately. The way he plays with his injury is inspiring." Vincent closed the app, overwhelmed. His whole life was changing, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. But maybe that was the point. Maybe you were never really ready for the moments that changed everything. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Robert. "I'm in." 3 simple words that would change the course of his life forever. 3 months later, Vincent stood in a recording studio staring at the most beautiful piano he'd ever played. It made the Steinway at the hotel look ordinary. The engineer behind the glass gave him a thumbs up, and Vincent took a deep breath. The album was almost finished. They'd recorded 15 pieces over the past 12 weeks, working every weekend and most evenings after Vincent's shifts. His hands hurt constantly now, especially the injured one, but it was a good kind of hurt. The kind that came from doing what you loved. The video from the charity gala had done exactly what Robert predicted. It had exploded across the internet, racking up millions of views. News outlets had picked up the story. A local TV station had done a feature on him. People Vincent had never met stopped him on the street to tell him how his story had inspired them. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. But the best part, the part that made all of it worthwhile, had happened 2 weeks ago. Vincent had finally saved enough money to fly his mother to the United States. He'd picked her up at the airport, and when she saw him, she'd cried so hard she couldn't speak for 5 minutes. Now she was living with him in a bigger apartment, one with 2 bedrooms and windows that actually let in sunlight. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. And for the first time in 17 years, Vincent didn't feel like he was drowning. "Ready when you are," the engineer said through the speakers. Vincent positioned his hands over the keys. This was the last track for the album, and he'd saved the most important one for last. It was a piece he'd written himself during those years of washing dishes and playing in secret. He'd never shared it with anyone before. He'd called it Phoenix Hand. The piece started soft, almost hesitant, like something broken trying to remember how to be whole. His left hand carried a melody that was equal parts sadness and hope. Then his right hand joined in, not trying to be perfect, just trying to be present. The 2 hands danced around each other, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension, but always moving forward. Vincent poured everything into it. All the pain of the accident, all the frustration of the year spent invisible, all the joy of being seen again, all the gratitude for this second chance that he'd never expected and definitely didn't deserve. When he finished, there was silence from the control room. Vincent looked up, worried he'd messed something up. Then Robert's voice came through the speakers, thick with emotion. "That's the one. That's the track that's going to change everything." The album released on a Friday morning in December. Vincent was at work when it dropped, his phone buzzing constantly with notifications. Danny kept checking the charts on his phone between orders, giving Vincent updates. "You're number 3 on the classical charts already. Number 2 now. Oh man, you just hit number 1. By the end of his shift, Vincent's album was trending on multiple platforms. Music critics who usually only reviewed established artists were writing about the Dishwasher pianist and his unconventional playing style. Some praised it as revolutionary. Others called it technically imperfect but emotionally powerful. All of them agreed it was impossible to listen without feeling something. Patricia called him into her office the next day. Vincent's stomach twisted, worried that all the attention was becoming a problem for the hotel. "Sit down," she said, and her tone was impossible to read. Vincent sat, preparing himself for bad news. Patricia leaned back in her chair. "The Grand Belmont wants to offer you a new position. House pianist. You'd play 4 nights a week in the main dining room and at special events. The salary is 10 times what you make now." Vincent's mind went blank. 10 times? You've brought us incredible publicity. Every news story mentions the hotel. We've had a 30% increase in bookings since your performance went viral. The board wants to capitalize on that. She slid a contract across the desk. "This is a serious offer, Vincent. You'd be performing, not washing dishes." Vincent stared at the paper. This was everything he'd dreamed of back when he was 25. A steady performing job. Financial security, respect, can I think about it? He asked. Patricia looked surprised. Of course. Take a few days. That night, Vincent sat with his mother in their apartment. She was cooking adobo, filling the space with smells that reminded him of home. He told her about the offer. That's wonderful, Anak. Why do you look worried? Robert wants me to tour. Small venues at first, but he thinks we could build up to bigger shows. If I take the hotel job, I'll be stuck in one place. But it's stable. It's safe. His mother turned off the stove and came to sit beside him. She took his scarred hand in both of hers. You spent 17 years being safe. Being invisible. Is that what you want now? I don't want to fail again. You didn't fail before. Life happened. A terrible accident happened. But you survived it. You adapted. You kept your music alive even when no one was watching. She squeezed his hand gently. Now people are watching and they want to see what you'll do next. Don't choose the safe path just because you're afraid. Vincent thought about that conversation for 2 days. He thought about his father, who'd worked himself to death trying to give his son a better life. He thought about all those nights playing alone in an empty ballroom, keeping a dream alive that seemed impossible. He thought about that moment on stage when he'd decided to stop being invisible. On Monday, he called Robert first. Tell me more about this tour. Robert's excitement was immediate. Start small. Coffee shops, community centers, small theaters. Build an audience. Let people see you perform live. Vincent, your album is doing better than we ever expected, but live performance is where you'll really connect with people. What about money? I need to support my mother. The album sales will cover that for now, and I'll advance you money against future earnings. You won't get rich, not right away, but you'll be playing music instead of washing dishes. Vincent called Patricia next. I'm grateful for the offer. Really, I am, but I need to see how far this can go. There was a pause on the other end. Then Patricia laughed. I figured you'd say that. You didn't strike me as someone who'd play it safe. The job will be here if you need it. Go make something of this opportunity. The tour started small, just like Robert said. A bookstore in the city, a community college auditorium, a church basement. But word spread quickly. Venues started selling out. People wanted to hear the dishwasher pianist in person, wanted to see the scarred hand that made such beautiful music. Vincent's mother came to every show she could, sitting in the front row with tears in her eyes. Danny came too, bringing friends who brought more friends. Even Patricia showed up once, giving Vincent a standing ovation that made him laugh and cry at the same time. 6 months after that charity gala, Vincent played his first real concert hall. Not Carnegie Hall, not yet, but a proper theater with 1,000 seats. Every ticket sold out in 3 days. Standing backstage before the show, Vincent looked at his hands. The right one was still scarred, still limited, still a reminder of everything he'd lost. But it was also a reminder of everything he'd found. The music hadn't died in that car accident. It had just been waiting, patient and persistent for its moment to return. He walked out on stage to thunderous applause. The spotlight hit him, and for a second he was back in that ballroom, wearing a borrowed jacket. Terrified and invisible, but he wasn't invisible anymore. Vincent sat at the piano and the crowd quieted. He looked out at all those faces, all those people who'd come to hear him play. Regular people, working people, people who understood what it meant to struggle and survive and hope for something better. He began to play, and the music filled the hall like light filling a dark room. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real and honest and full of the kind of beauty that only comes from breaking and healing and refusing to give up. When he finished his set, the standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. People were crying. People were cheering. And Vincent realized something that made his heart feel too big for his chest. He'd spent 17 years being invisible, thinking his story was over. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time he wasn't going to let fear make him small. This time he was going to play like the whole world was listening. Because finally, beautifully, impossibly, they were.